Michigan has added to its 2022 recruiting class. The Wolverines land Rivals 100 wide receiver Tyler Morris out of the Chicago area, former teammate of freshman early enrollee quarterback J.J. McCarthy. Obviously, Sharon Moore, Josh Gaddis, huge in this recruitment. Same with J.J., an elite recruiter in his own right. But the Wolverines now move up from number 22 in the country with their seventh commit up to number 16 in the national recruiting rankings. I'm Clayton Sayfie with EJ Holland here from the Wolverine.com. We're going to break down Tyler Morris's commitment, what kind of player Michigan's getting, and look ahead a little bit to what is to come in this 2022 class, especially when it comes to wide receiver recruiting. But you can follow along and get all of our content on this commitment at thewolverine.com. Use the promo code BLUE60 for 2 months of our premium content, absolutely free. And thank you to our sponsors, Lewis Jewelers, as well. But EJ, let's get into this commitment first, and we'll start with the recruitment before we talk about Tyler Moore as a player. But kind of came quickly. Like it wasn't. Obviously Michigan's been in a good spot, but it seemed like he wanted to take some visits over the summer when things open up. But he decides to pull the trigger here for the Wolverines in April instead. I guess, how did this all play out?
Yeah, it was an interesting situation. Tyler Morris has always been a very calculated person in terms of how he takes his recruitment. He's always made very careful and selected decisions. Same thing when he does interviews, he doesn't really give too much away. And so he kind of keeps up a little bit of a barrier. So it's a surprise and not a surprise. One, it is a surprise because of that approach that Tyler has taken, because he had already scheduled an official visit to Notre Dame and was planning to take official visits to both Michigan and Florida in June as well, and then make his decision afterwards, which seems like a very Tyler Morris type of plan. Narrow it down to three, make your visits, make a decision. And instead, obviously, he pulled the trigger today and gave the Wolverines a commitment. And I think a little bit of that had to do with this weekend. Tyler did suffer an injury. He had his second interception of the game. He was actually playing safety and was dominating on the back end. He jumped up, notched an interception, and then just came down awkwardly on his leg. Now, we don't know the extent of the injury. There's some different rumors and speculation out there, as there's always going to be when you have such a high profile recruit suffer an injury. We're not going to really get into that right now. That's a private family matter for Tyler Morris and his family. And I think, the general public will be informed when the appropriate time. But I think the injury, regardless of severity, kind of gave Tyler that extra push to, okay, there's always a risk for injury. I have some great scholarships on the table. Let me just go ahead and take one. And especially Michigan, which he obviously chose because that's been the school he's been leaning to the longest. Look, I know that Notre Dame made a very strong push. They locked in an official visit. They were being more aggressive than Michigan over the last month. And there was even a future cast put in for Morris to land at Notre Dame. But we never wavered over at the Wolverine. We always said that, we felt very confident in Tyler siding with Michigan, that, not to listen to any outside noise unless we changed our picks. Obviously, I know Tyler very, very well, being here in Chicago and having seen him 37 times. So I just felt like, Tyler made a business decision today and went ahead and picked Michigan for a variety of factors. But the bottom line is he's always loved the university. He's always been a Michigan lean. He's always wanted to get a great education and be a little further away from home and link up with his former teammate, J.J. McCarthy. So I think it worked out for him a little sooner than even he expected.
Yeah, you've seen him quite a bit. It's kind of funny. This is a little behind the scenes action for the viewers out there. But uh, I was looking for a photo of Tyler before the commitment to get things all straight on social media, and I was searching EJ's Twitter for a photo, and there was like a million of them that came up, and I could just take my pick basically, going back, a year or two or whatever. So you've obviously seen him quite a bit and really like him as a prospect. And he's a guy that we've really talked about quite a bit as one of these top of the line, top of the board type guys for Michigan. Um, as far as the staff, I mean, I mentioned Sharon Moore, I mentioned Josh Gaddis. It's kind of funny. We talk a lot about what the new staff members are doing. Mo Linguist is obviously a stud on the recruiting trail. You're starting to see Mike McDonald get more and more involved as a defensive coordinator on some of these bigger staff calls and things like that. But this was a good old-fashioned Sharon Moore, Josh Gaddis, type of recruitment, and Sharon Moore saying, hey, don't forget about me. He was the elite recruiter on Michigan staff before some of these other guys came about, and he's still that, I think, for Michigan. Obviously huge coming out of Chicago, and we've kind of mentioned, you talked about Notre Dame getting a pick at one point in the recent past. So just a huge, huge land for Michigan out of Chicago and things like that. I guess, what kind of job did you see the staff doing in this recruitment, specifically the two guys I mentioned?
They approached Tyler the right way. Fans can be up in arms about Michigan taking a more laid back approach than Notre Dame, but at the end of the day, it worked because you need to know how to recruit a certain type of kid. Like every kid on the recruiting trail is different. Donovan Edwards is different than Tyler Morris. Tyler Morris is different than Rocco Spindler. All these kids have different personalities, and you have to know the right way to approach them. And now some of those, approaches might not be the right way. You might miss on a few, but I thought with Tyler, they handled it exactly the way they needed to. Tyler is a very team first person. Once his spring junior season started, he was really locked in on his team. He's never been a fan of the recruiting process. So Tyler's not the type of kid that's like, I want to be shown love all the time, or I need constant contact to feel valued. Tyler is the type of kid that's like, look, let me focus on my team, and then we'll talk recruiting afterwards. I know where I stand on Michigan's board, and it is what it is. So I think that with Tyler, that was the right approach, and he didn't need an aggressive style recruitment. And the things that Josh Gaddis and Sharon Moore really hit on were family, education, and fit. Those were the three factors they really sold Tyler on. With the first two, Tyler really, really valuing, because he mentioned to me constantly over the 2 years that I've covered him that he really appreciates how genuine the staff is when it comes to preaching family and education and changing the culture. And so Tyler, checks all those boxes, and that's why he ended up signing with Michigan. I think Tyler has a little more personality, even though he is that quiet type of leader. I could have seen him maybe fitting in at Notre Dame, but I think Tyler's getting the fit he wanted at Michigan, getting the best of both worlds with some really good, a good city in Ann Arbor, getting a great education, getting to play on a massive stage in front of a big fan base. So overall, I felt like the staff just did a really good job of knowing Tyler Morris and knowing how to approach his recruitment.
Mm-hmm. He came into our office, actually. I mean, obviously, you know this, but I'm just talking to the people here. Last fall, and him and his mom, and we got to interview him and everything. And obviously, that video is up on our YouTube channel here. But just kind of talking with them before and after the interview, and off camera and things like that, and they seem like very down to earth people. They seem like people that would fit in at Michigan. They certainly could fit in at a Notre Dame or whatever, but they'd been to Michigan quite a bit. They seemed, like they were very intrigued and happy to be there. And obviously that ended up, kind of foreshadowing, I guess you could say, this decision. Let's talk about Tyler as a player. You mentioned the injury, he goes down, but when healthy, and you kind of talked about how, he was able to even play on defense, when you saw him last week. But I guess Tyler as a player, what is the, what's the comparison you have for him? And then, just what you think he's going to bring to this Michigan offense, because he's obviously a dynamic player, but super, technically, sound as well as a wideout.
Yeah, so Michigan fans might love or hate this comparison, but I've brought up Garrett Wilson, Ohio State wide receiver, who is quickly becoming one of the best wideouts in college football. I covered Garrett extensively during my time in Texas, and if I were to come up with a player comparison, it would be Tyler. I mean, literally, I was talking to one of my colleagues who still covers Texas, and I was like, this Tyler Morris kid is like a carbon copy of what Garrett was, both from a personality standpoint and the way they approach the game, the way they approach their teammates. And so, honing in on Tyler, I'm sure Michigan fans are familiar with Garrett Wilson. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about, Tyler shares the same similarities as Garrett. But the first thing that pops out about Tyler is just how technically sound he is, how tactical of a route runner and advanced of a route runner he is at this age. If Tyler joined the Michigan team right now, I would be willing to bet that he runs better routes than half the players on the roster. I mean, he is that good as a high school junior when it comes to route running. He knows how to create separation. He knows how to get open. He knows how to work with his quarterback when things break down. He is just so savvy. He has a really high football IQ, great student in the classroom. And so those are the things that really make Tyler special, along with his hands. I talked to Nazareth Academy head coach Tim Rackey. He said Tyler Morris has Hall of Fame hands. That's the best way to describe his hands out of any receiver that I've ever covered. And that includes, Heisman Trophy winner Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Terrace Marshall, guys that are going high in the draft this year. I think Tyler Morris has the best hands that I've ever covered. He can really catch anything in his vicinity. He has excellent body control. And like Garrett Wilson, Garrett wasn't known as a burner out of high school, and he was always highly ranked, but he really made that final jump into five-star status as more of a senior. With Tyler, every time I saw him, he got better. And like Garrett, he's not a burner, but he's very quick in and out of his breaks. Like I said, he gets separation. He knows how to get open, and he's just a really underrated athlete. Tyler can go up and get it. Like I said, he played safety, had 2 interceptions. Kind of with Garrett, the biggest knock on him was how speedy is he, how athletic is he? When Garrett could take over games in 7-on-7 too, win jump balls, like you've seen him do here at the college level. He could dunk the hell out of a basketball too. So I think Tyler is very, very similar to a Garrett Wilson and can play a similar role at Michigan. He can be an inside guy. He can be an outside guy. He's that, type of special receiver that can do a little bit of everything while being a guy that's super sure-handed and your quarterback's best friend. And he's literally the quarterback's best friend because he played with J.J. McCarthy at the high school level as well.
Yeah, and while Michigan fans may not like Garrett Wilson, they kind of want guys like that. So I think that is kind of nice to hear, if you're a Michigan fan, that he is that type of guy. Like you said, carbon copy of Garrett Wilson. So like I mentioned, Michigan has 7 commits now in this class of 2022. It's kind of rising up the rankings. Obviously, a long ways to go. And it's kind of funny, if you reverse the clock back about a year ago, Michigan only had a few commits in 2021, and there was a column, I think, from an Ohio State homer, I think it was on The Athletic, saying, like, is Michigan even actively recruiting in the 2021 class? Obviously, they end up with a top 10 class and things like that. So we know that, while Michigan doesn't have an elite class yet, they're off to a good start with guys like Will Johnson, Tyler Morris, Tayshaun Trent, and things like that. That they can get there. What is next specifically for wide receiver recruiting, and who do you think may join him in that little group there?
Yeah, so Michigan's looking to take 3 to 4 wide receivers overall. I think that number may get to 4, considering that Tayshaun Trent has more position flexibility. Tayshaun Trent's a guy that we've talked about often. That's a bigger outside receiver right now, but he may eventually outgrow the position and be more of a flex end or even a linebacker, where he also starts at the high school level. Tyler's obviously a pure receiver, so that leaves about 2 to 3 spots open for wide receiver. I think the more likely number is probably 2 to give you a group of 4, with Trent being more of an athlete take. The guys they're very high on, they'd like a tall, big outside receiver. So Darius Clemens is top of the board guy, Rivals 250 prospect out of Oregon. He's originally from Michigan. He actually played Little League football with Andrew Anthony, Michigan's 2021 wide receiver signee. So Clemens definitely fits that bill. So does Jaden Mangum, an in-state prospect who some people really, really like at safety. Some people really, really like at wide receiver. Michigan's been recruiting him on the offensive side of the ball. And he's a 6'3" kid, but he's very, very skinny. He's about 6'3", maybe a buck 70, but I think he has a lot of room to add weight. So I would say those are the two, true outside guys they're looking at. And then, Josh Gaddis is always going to want speed, especially with losing, Xavier Worthy. I think adding speed is a must in this class. And, who better than Caleb Brown, a fellow Chicagoan guy who can do a little bit of everything, be an explosive dynamite player. I saw him over the weekend, and he definitely has a ton of speed. He would be a perfect fit for the speed and space offense. He played club 7-on-7 with both JJ McCarthy and Tyler Morris, so there's connections there. I think right now Ohio State probably has an advantage, but Michigan very much making a push for Caleb Brown. So we'll have more, in-depth thoughts on what's next for wide receiver recruiting, but that's kind of just a taste of where they stand with the position group.
There you have it. There is our full breakdown of Tyler Morris committing to Michigan, and obviously for a lot more coverage, head to the Wolverine.com. EJ has about, we'll say 37 articles up on Tyler Morris. Over there, use the promo code BLUE60 to get all of our premium content for free. You can discuss everything with thousands of fans on our message board, and we will see everyone next time.